And welcome everybody to another fantastic episode of Spoiled. Well, we haven't done one of these in a while. I'm your host, Ben Reeves. This is where we talk all about one game, very in-depth, and spoil everything. So, warning now, we're going to go very in-depth on Resident Evil Village and spoil the heck out of it. So if you're listening and you don't want to be spoiled on Resident Evil 8, turn your ears away right now. I'm joined by an eclectic crew. I've assembled the best in the business. Kimberly Wallace, how's it going?
Hey, I'm proud to be the best in the business. Let's do this.
That's right. And Daniel Tack.
What game are we here discussing today?
That's the energy I love to hear.
Okay.
Not
Blake Hester, how you doing?
Hello, Ben. I'm feeling and looking great today.
You are looking great.
Thank you.
Anna Rupert.
What up? Let us talk some Resident Evil goodness.
That's right.
Ready.
And
Yeah,
if
girl.
that wasn't enough, we brought in a heavy hitter. You probably remember him, love him, and know him. Suriel Vazquez, how's it going?
Hello, it's nice to be here. It's nice to be back.
Welcome. In case we have new listeners who haven't been aware of GI more than a year or more in the past, you used to work at Game Informer.
I used to work at Game Informer. Now I do a lot of stuff with MinMax, a Patreon made of former Game Informer employees. You can find us at patreon.com/MinMax with 2 N's, and we do a lot of YouTube and Twitch stuff. We're having a lot of fun. So
awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show today, Suriel. We appreciate it. And we're excited to talk Resident Evil with you.
Yeah. I've reviewed the game. For context, I reviewed the game for Polygon. So I definitely am ready to talk spoilers because there's a lot of stuff in this game.
Yeah, for sure. And we definitely want to get into the spoiler stuff. I think just as a quick setup, I'd love to go around the table. I know Kim and Liana and I have talked extensively about the game already, but I'd love to hear Suriel, Blake, Dan, just quickly, what was your impression of the game overall? What do you think of it?
I loved it. I think it's one of my favorite Resident Evils in a long time. Maybe since 4. I really like that remake of the original. But it's definitely one of those games where as I played it, I thought man, I think I really like this a lot more than a lot of the stuff they've done recently. Not that that stuff was bad, but yeah, I'm really blown away by it.
Awesome, cool. Dan, what about you?
It is my favorite of the modern Resident Evils. I will say that the game as a whole felt like a wild roller coaster ride. And as we talk about the game, we'll get into more specifics. But I thought it started out really hot, really strong, and it peaked in the middle, and then it was just a downhill crater till the bitter end. But still, again, lots of smart improvements here over 7. Definitely a better game than 7, and I overall enjoyed it.
Blake, do you have anything to report?
Look, Ben, this game of the year already. I don't know if that's true. But no, Resident Evil 4, hands down, brass tacks, one of my favorite games of all time. Do not much care for 5 or 6. Have never played them to completion. So 15 years on, I think this is the Resident Evil 4 follow-up I always wanted. In fact, I think it maybe borrows and steals a little too liberally from Resident Evil 4 at times. But yeah, that's what made me love it the most. It was just holy shit, this is everything I would want, having skipped a lot of the direct follow-ups to 4.
Awesome, cool. Well, yeah, let's dive into it. I prepped sort of a recap, if you will, of the narrative that we can go over to touch base. I think, it stars Ethan Winters, who was introduced in Resident Evil 7. So I wanted to quickly set up what happened in Resident Evil 7, just to remind people, because a lot of the stuff that happens in 7 is important, it turns out, in Resident Evil Village. So, in July 2017, Ethan Winters is drawn to a derelict mansion in Louisiana to rescue his wife, Mia, who had been presumed dead since going missing in 2014. After being captured by an insane cannibalistic Baker family, Ethan discovers his wife, Mia, has been infected by a fungal superorganism simply known as the mold. This mold gives people regenerative powers, but it also seems to drive them crazy. Ethan eventually cures his wife, and the two are helicoptered away by mainstay Chris Redfield, which brings us to the events of Village, in which Ethan returns as the protagonist. He and his wife have moved to Europe to escape the past and sort of settle down to have nice, calm life. They now have a daughter, Unfortunately, it isn't long before Chris Redfield shows up, kills Mia, kidnaps Ethan and his daughter, and hours later, Ethan wakes up to discover that his transport has been attacked and he is now free, so he sets off into the village to save his daughter. That's kind of the setup of the game. Any quick thoughts? I definitely want to talk about the ending, and we'll get there, but any quick thoughts on just that opening intro area / when you start to enter the village for the first time?
I want their house.
Their house is beautiful. They slaughtered Mia. You undersold it. That is a shocking scene. I guess they kind of give context later as to why it was so extreme, but that was like...
Yeah, it was very violent.
Yeah. I mean, if y'all are Rainbow Six operatives, I feel like one headshot could have done the job, but they put like 7 clips
That's
into
exactly what
Mia.
I was thinking. I was like, I think you guys got it. I think she's down.
Yeah. That's also the first chance that Chris has.
Have it.
Yeah, that was also the first chance that Chris had to be like, okay, look, I need to tell you something real quick so that you don't do what you're about to do. I think we can save ourselves a lot of trouble if I am just being direct with you about what's going on. But he chooses not to do that. He chooses violence.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you don't have a game if he tells you the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those
Roll
things
credits.
where we learn later on. I mean, this is spoiled, so we can talk about it. Spoilers. We learn later on that Mia is not, the Mia in the scene is not actually Mia. You know, it turns out that it's another character that was pretending to be Mia, Mother Miranda, and she invaded Ethan's home to try to, I guess, kidnap his daughter. So that's what we find out. But Chris comes in to try to put a stop to that. But like, you're right, Suriel. Why didn't he just say like, "Hey, Ethan, let me pull you aside. Guess what? This isn't Mia." I feel like he could have saved some headaches there.
Yeah, instead of like, you're an unstoppable machine who basically stopped an entire family by yourself. Really, no reason for you to get involved. See you later. It was really very
Maybe
weird.
he was like trying to mitigate any damage, like not to give him, like if he came in rolling up saying something, maybe he was scared to like alert her that, hey, we're on to you, you nasty hoe, like we're gonna kill you
Liana.
instead.
Instead, he alerted her with a hail of gunfire.
Here's what upset me about this. Chris has been doing this for many years. I thought he was smarter than this. I mean, he's not. He's more brawn than brains, obviously, in some cases. But by this time, I feel like he could have handled this in a better way. And I like how the game will eventually bring that back up. You know, towards the end, it gets discussed, like, why didn't he trust Ethan or whatever. But it feels like just a weird... Something was, because I the whole time thought, well, so that's not Chris, or something's off with Chris, because why would he just come in there and not even, I don't know. There are some plot holes to me, or some stuff that just doesn't make sense or add up. I mean, that's, that happens in the Resident Evil universe, but it really bothered me of like, there feels like there's a simple solution to this, and Chris, you kind of screwed it up and
Chris
drew
is
everything
the
out to what it
council.
had to be. So
Chris is what the council is to Mass Effect, of like if they would just get their crap together. But I kind of liked it though, because like that did spawn all of these like insane fan theories of like, is he a clone? Is he really a bad guy? Is Blue Umbrella like worse than we thought? Like, I don't know. I liked the shock factor because that kept me engaged. Like, I was like, I need to get to a point where this whole Chris thing is explained, because it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know, I thrived in that chaos. I was like, I need to know what happens, which as a huge weenie, that kept me in the game. Because if not, I probably would have taken more breaks than I did.
well, yeah,
You
I mean,
mentioned
you're
fan
curious.
theories.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned fan theories. I remember seeing like the marketing for the game, and people were saying like, well, it's like, here's Chris's face and it's like half werewolf. Is he one of the Lycans? Which is definitely like, I was totally like, okay, that's probably what's going to happen. And maybe the second half you play as Chris, like werewolf Chris, which ended up only half happening. But yeah, like the idea that he was a wolf was definitely, it felt like a red herring.
I'll be honest. I wanted them to like do something bold and turn Chris evil. Like, I thought that would have been awesome if they like, that's how like what ended up happening. And then the rest of the game was like, it's set up for the series to like explore that, and like how he became evil, and like what, just, I don't know. I was hoping for a little bit more on that front, but maybe I like when series take big swings with like established characters and change things up a bit. So I thought that I was kind of hoping they were going to do more with it. So I was a little disappointed when I found out what the truth actually was. I was like, I was hoping you're going to turn into the big bad, actually.
It's one of those things where I knew Chris was going to be good in the end, or
that's what bothered me, right?
So it's kind of, you just kept waiting for like, when's that reveal going to happen, and can they justify it? And it's kind of questionable whether or not they were able to justify his actions entirely. But I want to keep moving on so we can get through the narrative and talk about the twist. We get to the castle after exploring the village a little bit. Ethan gets to the castle where he meets Lady D. Everybody's big fan of Lady D and her vampires, and he fights them. Any thoughts on that castle section or Lady D? And specifically, I think some people are going to be surprised that she's not like the biggest villain in the game, that she's actually only in like the first fourth of the game. Yeah.
She's a footnote. I thought that was really weird too, because like so much of the marketing centered around her, and then the game changes scope so much that you almost even forget she was in it to begin with, because it just feels like a blip. Even though the game's pretty short, it just feels like a blip. But I loved all of the Dracula nods, like with the fact that one of the daughters is Bella, and just, I don't know, it felt classic horror, which is kind of cool because later in the game you play as Chris, and that felt almost like a Call of Duty game with the high-powered weaponry and just the I'm under 6. It's like, okay, like cool.
My fiance had walked in during the Chris section. He's like, this doesn't even look like Resident Evil. What is this? I was like, no, trust me, it is. But to go back, I love the stuff at the mansion with Lady D and her daughters and the stalking elements they had there. Like, I love when you never know when you turn the corner where those characters are. And like a big part of it is, it's like Mr. X, the fun of that, trying to avoid and make sure you don't, step into, their line of sight. But what was cool about that too is like, I never knew for sure. I'm like, when should I be fighting her daughters? And then you get to the parts where you're like, oh, this is it. This is when I can like get some light in the room and blast these girls. But I like that suspense that you had. And I'm glad that I was worried that every place you visited was going to have like a boss stalking you that way. I'm glad they just used it for really that part. And then you did the mansion, and you weren't like not every area you went to with every boss had the same kind of, stick. Like, they're watching you, obviously, and they're taunting you, but they do it in different ways throughout, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, there's definitely the propeller guy later in the game, but those feel a little more scripted than the Lady D stuff, for sure.
For being high society, they were gross. They didn't do their dishes. There were so many dishes just lying around. Like, you guys are nasty.
There's always the like kitchen where you're like, oh, everything here is so nasty, and that's somehow supposed to be related to like, oh, obviously they're all zombies, but like, no, they could have just not been very like clean as a people before they became zombies.
Dishwasher.
Yeah.
Zombies actually use dishes either. Like, I just think they eat people and then they go out there. Like, they don't like sit there and put it on a dish.
It's always blamed on like they're deteriorating, but it's like always been like, well, it's not like the zombies are suddenly going to use dishes and then just not use the dishwasher. Like, it's the people's fault that those dishes are like that.
Yeah, they must be feeding people and fattening them up, and then not doing the dishes.
Yeah,
you figured it out. You figured it out. That's the theory.
Where's the Duke? Maybe he's coming in and eating everything. We don't need to spend a lot of time on him. Any thoughts on the merchant? Do you guys like him, or?
More so than the merchant, the new inventory system I greatly enjoyed. I think we're talking about the story here, but the fact that I didn't have to worry once about having to go back to a box and dump all my crap and switch everything around was a breath of fresh air after 7, for sure. And the Duke's part of that, I guess, as part of that new system. Sell your old gun, get a new gun, upgrade some stuff.
Exactly. And I like that the keys and the stuff that you needed to the village did not count in your inventory the way that it did. Drove me nuts in 7 when I was just like, oh, I need this to open this key to open this, and now I don't have it in my inventory. Like, I thought that was smart. But yeah, I felt overloaded with the guns, like, because I went around and got all the treasures, and it was hard for me to decide like what to invest in, because it's like, well, now there's this shotgun, and of course, you get the grenade launcher, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna need that. because that's going to be helpful. But there's a lot of guns that you can pick up in the game and even buy from the merchant later on. And I wasn't sure which ones did you guys like. I always wanted a shotgun, but like I could not for the life of me figure out what was in my best interest to keep on my shortcut wheel. I had the rifle for a while because I like to shoot things up. That were flying.
I cycled
Sorry,
my.
Now that's gonna get. Oh man, that's gonna be a clip. Sorry.
We have a guide coming out for that though soon. So anybody listening,
I cycled my shortcuts, just constantly throughout the game based on, like, I'd see an enemy encounter coming up, and I'd be like, okay, I don't need, this isn't going to be good for the mines. I'm going to want something more direct or whatever. So, or if I was like, oh, that's a big ass boss, let me put pipe bombs and mines in my shortcut and switch it. So I was constantly updating that.
I feel like
no
I was
matter what.
leaning on my shotgun pretty much throughout the whole game, though, for sure.
I love that shotgun.
Shotgun was my go-to. Because it's one shot and you could do it right in their face. Because I go ham. I go in. I'm like, I don't care about danger, which is why I died a lot. And shoddy to the face was awesome. I don't know. I really liked going back to the merchant though. Like I really liked Duke because I don't know. As iconic as Merchant from Resident Evil 4 was, like Duke actually meant something to the story. Like his hints about what you need to know and how he kind of acted as your guide, and was really interesting to me. And it made me really want to just learn more about that character. But there was also really awkward sometimes too, because like there was one part where you're going down an elevator. And he like wakes up, but he just stares at you awkwardly. I was like, you gotta say something or not? Like we're just gonna have this like stare off. If you play though, throw a grenade at him or a pipe bomb at him. It's really funny.
What happens?
It doesn't die, but he like, I don't know. He just kind of acknowledges it barely, like, oh, like rude. And I don't know. It's just
in RE4, you can kill the merchant. Can you in this game? I didn't try.
I don't know if you can kill him.
Yeah, I don't know if you can. I want to go back. Suriel, you had mentioned that you thought Chris might turn into a werewolf or kind of wondered. I was like, oh man, that's a good idea. Did anybody else have this sense? Like there's a moment in the game where Ethan's fingers get bit off by a lichen. And I kept thinking like, I wonder if Ethan's going to turn into a werewolf at some point. I kind of kept expecting him to like turn into a wolf or something. Was anybody else thinking that?
At no point did I think Ethan would be anything more than a terrible, terrible character with horrible one-liners and.
Oh God!
I mean, I agree. Like did anybody like Ethan? There's not much to him.
He's as likable as any other Resident Evil character.
He would have been better as a completely silent protagonist. He would kill every moment that he tried to say anything of interest. Like, I remember, I don't know which boss it is, but like you kill the boss, there's a big fight, and then he's just like, eat shit. And it's like, what is it? Am I playing Duke Nukem here? What the hell is this? Like, I was everything he said was just mortifying. Like, he'd be better if he just shut up.
I think characters like Chris and Leon and Claire, I think those characters are way more interesting to me, even though there's not a lot. They don't do a whole lot more, but for some reason I like those characters way more than I like Ethan.
Yeah, it's this weird mix between like, in the marketing, you don't even see his face, right? Because they're trying to make it feel like he's a character insert. Like, oh, maybe you could someday aspire to wear like a green jacket and a hoodie. It's this weird thing of like, they want to make him like an anonymous player insert, but then they give him like this huge backstory of like, here is, he married Mia and then they had a kid, and like he has all this like backstory that makes him not good as a character insert. But because they want to make him like really generic so you can see yourself in him, he doesn't really have any strong characteristics besides like sometimes he'll curse at bosses is this kind of his thing, right? So it's this weird, very inconsistent character a lot of the time.
I found that weird too, because he's clearly a white American male. So there's already some limiting factor on like who's going to associate with him anyway. So I didn't feel it necessary to keep his face obscured. That seemed unnecessary.
Game goes to some lengths to not show you that man's face at times.
It's really just a big chunk of mold. Okay. So that's why,
Well, there was a moment in the castle where my mouth dropped open where Lady D comes at you and she slices your hand off. I'm curious what you guys thought of that moment, because I was like, oh, holy crap. I wonder if they're going to stick with that, because that could be interesting if he just has one hand. But then, he does some magic.
When they put that hand back on, that is the weirdest scene ever. Like, oh, you can just like stick your hand back on. Like,
yeah, he just reattaches it, like throws on the hand be good juice, and then he like both the hand and the jacket recover completely.
The jacket thing is weird. His jacket should have been cut. That's so weird.
Yeah, to go back to your comment about an earlier comment, after replaying it, I realized that there's that scene where they are about to hang you on the hooks, right? As you start the castle section, and she like Lady D licks your hand and says like, and she's like tasting your blood, and she says, "Oh, it's a little stale," which is like in retrospect like a hint that some of the stuff about some of the stuff that happens later on. Yeah, so I thought that was a pretty good foreshadowing.
I didn't catch that. That's cool.
For all the lore heads out there, that's the second time that hand has been cut completely off of Ethan.
Yeah,
right?
I can't wait.
What does Capcom have against his hands, y'all? Like,
so what I was thinking about this, and I think what it is it's in first person, so the hands are the easiest thing to just like fuck up real bad and make gross, because you're not seeing much else. But it has become such a bizarre motif of like, time to screw this poor man's hands up again. I can't remember now if he gets his left or right hand cut off in 7, but either way, he's lost them twice.
Yeah, I that was the moment though where I was like, oh, there's something effed up going on with his body though. Like he definitely has some regenerative powers. He's not a normal everyman like other RE characters. When it's kind of neat, and I like that. That's like the one cool thing about that character is like there's something messed up with his body, and I kind of feel like they explored it a little bit, but I wanted them to go into it a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole revelation of who he was with the later on in the game with Eve is weird. Like that whole hallucination that he has. I know we'll talk about that later, but that whole like hallucination he has with her was just bizarre. It felt like almost like there was like a couple major points in this game where it felt like they spliced cutscenes from different games and just kind of inserted it in. And sometimes it worked really well. Like the water level, it felt like it came directly out of Resident Evil 4, which I loved and hated because it scared the crap out of me. And like I was so stressed out. Like I was like panting. I felt like Van Aken. I was like, I'm okay. This is fine. Like, but then there was like other parts where like the Eve sequences just felt copy and pasted in and bizarrely like it felt like somebody who was learning to do video cuts and still hasn't quite got the pacing right yet. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with like how quiet it is. Like it basically keeps you in the dark for most of it, where where the plot is basically like, oh yeah, put the pieces of rose together, get those 4 flasks, and then you'll be done. And then towards the end, they're like, oh right, there's this whole plot from the beginning that I totally forgot about, and now we're going to do the lore dump here and here. How everything is so meaningful and relevant now.
Well,
that was a character I was really bummed to see return, was Evelyn from 7. She is so annoying. That little girl, when she showed up, I was like, come on, man.
A child after meeting Evelyn. And I just like, that's what else surprised them. They're like, Mia and Ethan settling down, having a baby. I'm like, after everything that happened in 7, you really want to have a child. Like,
well, so
surprising.
Talking about Rose, like I thought it was so messed up when he discovers like, oh, this is her head in this case I've been carrying around, and like the baby's cut up, and I want to like reassemble her, and it's so messed up that you can bring her back apparently too. Like, oh, I would feel uncomfortable if that was my kid. Like you had been cut up and I'm reassembling you, and now you're whole. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable with my child anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
you just need to put him in the umbrella stand and everything will be okay.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those things where even after I put you together, it's like, are you the same Rose? And I totally get like, he's a father or whatever. I'm not a father, so like maybe he would do anything he could to get his child back. But there was also this feeling of like, well, one, you're playing into these people's hands. You have to know this. And B, it's like, what comes out of those flasks? You don't know for sure that it's going to be anything resembling your child.
Isn't that also the plot of Akira? Like they bisect Akira to keep him not together until you put him back together to create the ultimate power for him. It's copy and paste.
Oh, come on, Capcom. Be original.
What is this?
So when are we to assume that Ethan was infected with this? Was it just at some point, like early on?
It was in 7, right?
Well, in 7. That's what I mean. Yeah. When he first got there, at the farm or where
Yes.
he was with the baby.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's implied that when he dies, like, because you at the end of like the initial section where you fight Mia, and then the baker, I forget his name, but like the eldest baker knocks you out. I think that is when he ends up killing you, and he brings you back as like the mold monster, and that's when you wake up at the dining room table with all of the rest of the Baker family. I think from that point on, you are the mold monster thing.
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Good old John Baker, great character.
Jack.
And so
Nothing as terrifying as being chased around an old house by a middle-aged dad. It's really,
Yeah.
really terrifying
Hey,
stuff.
that can be really scary. Sometimes they don't let you go to sleep early, so that's bad.
So is the idea that Mia is also a mold monster then? Is that what you guys took away?
We're all mold monsters deep down, Ben.
In our
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure where Mia ends up.
I feel like they're gonna do something really messed up with Mia in the future. Like really messed up with Mia. Like I feel like because they set it up towards the end where whatever game's gonna come next is gonna be like a big time jump. I feel like we're gonna retroactively hear about something terrible that happened regarding Mia.
Sure.
It's
Who knows?
gonna be nuts.
They'll make something up. It's
I feel
They've
like
proven they can do anything, right?
Mia.
Blake, go
sorry,
for it.
I'm thinking about it. I think Mia would have to have the mold too because she is like
Right.
very clearly possessed, and the game is very explicit that like you can only possess someone in that way with the mold or the metamycete or whatever the hell they're calling it.
She was infected in 7, and Ethan
That's what
cured
I'm-
her. Yeah, but I don't know if like what
Oh.
she has is the
Right.
same thing as what Ethan is. Like Ethan's like a weird mold
Right.
creature, presumably, but
Wait,
maybe Mia was more human than he is.
Does Ethan also take the shot? Okay.
he's like a super god power mold monster, right? There's different rules.
I feel
Yeah.
like that's what makes kind of what's interesting is they had a child together, Rose. So what does
Yeah.
that mean for Rose and her abilities? And I know we'll get into that more, but that's kind of what's interesting about where they left things of like these, you have Mia and Ethan who obviously like, what did they produce really? You don't know.
Yeah,
And that's what I wish they went into a
Yeah.
little bit more in depth, just exactly what is Ethan and is he different than what Mia is? And just clarifying some of that stuff would
I
help
mean-
me out a little bit.
Ben, if they keep it vague and ambiguous, they have way more wiggle room on their end
Yeah.
to just pull crap out of their ass, which is what they're doing all the time. So
But I mean, it
pretty
also makes
obvious.
it a more interesting narrative if you like dive into it.
I agree. It would be a more interesting. It would be a narrative, which is better than what's there.
Dan, do
Fair
you
enough.
like this game?
Before we keep it moving, I want to talk about one thing. I do like this game. I was just noticing this like each of the segments in this game, each of the four zones, it's basically its own game. Even like the castle, I liked a lot because the castle was basically an old school RE game, right?
Yep.
You go you go find the things, you put them on the things, right? And then you have a boss fight. Okay. And then you move on to something completely different. And then you go to RE4. And then the factory, I don't know what trash fire that was. It was an RE I didn't play, clearly.
Sorry for.
No. RE4
There's a whole industrial back half of that game.
Okay,
It's
just
the
all of them
exact
have
same.
industrial zones, right? They love the industrial zone as a final zone.
So I
in
said
RE,
I
right?
expected an industrial zone.
Yeah.
I just find them boring
Yeah.
at this point.
That's
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's fair.
sorry.
Well, before we talk about the factory,
Okay.
I would love to know what you guys thought of the dollhouse. I'm sure you guys are excited to talk about it.
Yeah,
Loved it.
This
That
was
was
the
my
best
favorite
part of the
part.
game by a bazillion times. Whoever came up with this segment, whoever came up with this game, they're all different games, right? I guess the segments are other in ways
Yeah.
they're all different games. This one I think resonated the best with me because it taps into new age gaming horror style, right? Like where you don't have a weapon, you cannot defend yourself, and usually I don't really get into RE puzzles, but I really liked the Mia mannequin. And the fact that they're willing to take a chance with the setup and just have you see nothing for like the first 30 minutes you go into that house, you're like, there's nothing in here. There's
Yeah.
nothing in this room. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. And then boom,
Build up.
you are in it. You are in the dark. And, there's the baby. and-
Giant freaking baby
Yeah.
chasing you.
That part was great.
That part was actually, I mean, God, I remember I finished the sequence and I was like, my heart, like I'm really on edge from this. Like,
Did you guys let the baby kill you at least once? Because that to me was art. Like you literally, because I didn't know. Okay, there's one sequence where you're playing and it's like chasing you through the hallway, and you have to trigger the elevator. You put on the power, and then you have to trigger the elevator. And my dumbass couldn't figure out like how to turn the elevator on, and I'm like, this like crazy baby demon thing is coming at me, and I was like, scream. My dog like has PTSD now because I was like screaming. She was like shaking, like mom's dying. And like how it eats you is it like sucks your feet up and it slowly eats you from your feet, and you just watch your body slowly get eaten. And I was just like, this is terrifying. Why would you do this to me?
Hey, look, they appeased the tall lady people. They had to appease every other kind of kink at some point. So it's like this is that one. I guess.
That giant baby was terrifying. I did not let it kill me because I was like, I gotta get the hell out of here.
And like Ethan like hides under the bed. I don't know if that was supposed to happen. And then he was just like, Dad. I was like, shut up.
It's the sound effects that go with it. I like the hiding under bed thing. It reminded me of Haunting Ground, another Capcom survival horror game that was really fun, where you had to hide from people stalking you. Just a little cool thing I noticed that I was like, this is fun. I'm glad they just used it for this one sequence to hide, but it was
the
still
bed
cool.
thing too. Is like, I don't know how you guys did it, but like I ran into the room and immediately dove into the bed.
Yeah, I did too.
You can't turn around, so like, the baby comes in the room and it's somewhere behind you and you can't see it. And
you're just like, I gotta run out.
My level of like terror.
As someone who has done that section 5 times at this point, because I'm trying to like do all the different run stuff. It's the best way to do it is to run around to the other side of the bed and get him from that side. So then when the baby comes in, you can get out more quickly. But yeah, I really enjoyed that section because for as many other games that it references, this felt like the Resident Evil 7 reference, because it's sort of like the trap house that one of the bakers puts you in, where you kind of have to figure out how to not die. So I thought it was a really cool kind of build on that, where they add the surreal element of like, here's all this creepy stuff that's happening, and it does tell its own self-contained story.
It's also interesting in that like a lot of the game up to that point is doing fear by like extremity. You're scared because of how intense things are and all the fucking awful gore you're seeing. And this is the one where it does fear by anticipation and makes you like really wait for it, and that dread it builds over that amount of time where, like Dan said, nothing is happening, is so much scarier than watching Ethan get his fingers cut off or Lady D like constantly
Lady D turning into some dumb undead dragon, which totally she was such a cooler character before that. I'm not trying to go back, but we never talked about that.
Wow,
well, that
I
part
would have
was
said
awesome.
you would have liked it, Dan, because it looked like a Bloodborne boss.
Right.
I know.
It played with your
She was
expectations.
better. The bug vampire thing, that was cool. I was like, wow, okay, so it's classic vampires, but they're like bugs. Okay, that's cool. Good job. You did a neat thing. And then it's like, well, what if we just had a big giant undead dragon fight on a tower instead? Whoa, like, okay, whatever. It's cooler as a big.
But was that
large
against that?
vampire.
You didn't expect it. That's what I liked. It was like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, and then I finished. Like, I had that fight, and I was like, let's go. Let's see what else this game has for me.
Yeah, I liked
All right,
it.
fair.
So by the time it gets to the baby, it feels so earned to go to somewhere that bizarre.
Were you talking, Blake? Were you in the middle of a thought?
Sorry.
It's fine. It feels so earned to go somewhere that bizarre, because if you walk in the house and they show the baby, that's dumb. You haven't earned that. But by making you wait for it and then hitting you with such a left hook, it works so well. And then it doesn't overstay its welcome. I had to hide twice from that baby. And if I had to hide 7 different times, it would have lost all intensity. Like, it really, really worked for the game.
Personally, I hide every time I see a baby.
Same.
Oh my god, how'd you get through the opening of Resident Evil Village? You got to carry a baby.
That was arguably
Just
the
not look at it.
part.
Keeping it hands in.
Can we talk
Straight
about
into
how
camera.
big Rose's head was, though?
Oh boy, here we go.
I don't think it could fit in that vial. I don't know.
That baby was big, and that baby was ugly. like, could you imagine?
Honestly,
Like,
he's probably better off without her.
She's a grower. Okay,
How did you birth
it's a glow up.
that? Like,
Oh my
damn,
lord.
girl.
I agree with you. Like, the dollhouse is awesome, and also, in addition to that, I really like the design of the creepy doll lady as well, and everybody's obsessed with Lady D. But I'm like, I kind of want to know more about this doll creature. I wish she was in the game.
Something I realized after beating that section was the doll was not technically the character. It was the ventriloquist, and my mind blanked that character out the entire time and thought it was a sentient doll. I mean, I guess in some ways maybe it is, but like when you see the 4 lords gathered together, I never even noticed the ventriloquist was there.
They
I
barely
only
show
saw
her.
the doll.
Well, is she
You just see her when she dies.
She is, yeah.
In the picture.
Oh, crazy.
And
Yeah.
when you stab the doll and you get the reveal that you killed the ventriloquist, I was like, who on earth is this character?
I love her.
Killed. It took me a
she's
second
great.
to realize.
I hope she gets DLC. She was the coolest character in that game.
I loved it too because it added a sense of normalcy to it. Like it kind of showed these people pre like metamorphosis or pre whatever that like these could have been real like this could have been your neighbor, this could have been you. Like I don't know, I liked because some of the creatures were really just abstractly grotesque and you can't see any humanity in them, and with her you could she looked like just a normal girl, and to see her as almost an afterthought was almost cool too, because it kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm over philosophizing it, but like to me it just showed like how that monstrous transformation just completely wipes out anything of what you were, and you're no longer human. And to me, like that was heartbreaking with her story particularly, because that's where it was really truly showcased.
Yeah,
that's a really great point.
They do a better job here at getting you to empathize with the villains. They do that whole kind of rogues gallery scene, and then like towards the end you find out that like all of the 4 kind of bloodlines were all like the result of failed experiments to get to put even another body, and so you feel like, okay, well, all these people kind of just had this happen to them. It's not like Mr. X or like the sewer monster where it's just like, well, this is a fish that just got mutated, oh well, I have to shoot it. Whereas this, because of how they set up each area as being part of like a domain, you get like this character's story as you're kind of fighting them, which I think is pretty cool.
Really quick, I want to point out with this section, and credit where it's due, I think it was Ian Higton that I got this from Eurogamer. Real heads know there's like 2 to 3 canceled versions of RE4, and one is based on hallucinations. And the E3 demo showed dolls. And he astutely pointed out this was a callback to one of the original versions of RE4, which I thought was very interesting.
It feels like that. That definitely makes sense.
It completely went over my head. And then when he said it, I was like, holy shit, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Such a cool deep cut.
That is cool. Yeah, they went really deep on this in a tribute to RE4 in a lot of ways, which is cool. I'd love to keep moving forward too, so we can get to the ending and can talk about it in depth. So I want to combine maybe the next 2 areas. You have the area where you go through the water and you fight that giant fish monster, and then there's also the part where you like dive into the hive of werewolves, basically the lichen. I don't know.
Stronghold.
Stronghold. Yes. Yeah. Any thoughts on those 2 sections?
Yeah.
I want to bang Heisenberg so bad. He should be a romance option.
That was also my thought.
I don't think has a sexy voice. Sorry.
I don't think Moreau, who's like the fish man, was the best character in terms of on-screen performance. But like, I think he's one of the more interesting villains of that game because he's so tortured in a way that like he almost doesn't want to be doing what he's doing to you. And a lot of villains, especially in video games, just like revel in how awful they are. And Moreau is just like pining for like affection from a mother figure that creates like a very tragic backstory to him that I thought was really interesting.
He was like the kid that got bullied. Like when he like tries to trick you, like, I'm so sad. Like, please let me prove myself. And it's like, I don't think all of that was for him. I don't think it was all faked. Like, I think it was like, because in the lore, like Blake was talking about earlier, the lore books, it says that he couldn't control the change and that it almost ripped him into 2 different people. And I don't think that like that first part where he's like, I just let me prove myself. I don't think that was necessarily the lore that we thought it was. Like, I feel like that was his 2 personalities kind of warring with each other of like, if I have to be stuck in this hell, let me mean something, like let it matter for something. And like, it was hard. It pulled my heartstrings, but also like screw that whole level, because that's what terrified me in Resident Evil 4 was that water level. Because water levels for me are like my hell. Like if there's hell, it's water levels and jumping puzzles, and it scared the crap out of me. And then they took what made RE4's water levels terrifying and like upped it because it never ends.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Like the having to do all the levers and making sure you're doing it at the same time and not getting caught by the big tail.
It's the stressful level, a very stressful
level. It feels like the inverse of the dollhouse, right? Because like I noticed that besides like there's one shack where you're trying to get the boat key, that you do fight some enemies, but I think from the moment you get the boat key to when you fight Moreau, you don't fight a single enemy. So it's all just like it is this very like cordon off section where you're going to confront this boss in like this very set PC way. But it feels like the exact opposite of Dollhouse, where the Dollhouse is this very slow puzzle room, whereas this is just like this almost like Uncharted-esque, like you have to push all these levers in place, make sure that, you know, the monster doesn't get you as you're crossing all those like planks and stuff. And it just, there's really heightened music. So it just feels like a chase sequence in a really like, that feels like the exact opposite of the Dollhouse, which is really like really good for pacing.
Yeah, and I like that part. And then like right after, I mean, we can talk more about the water if you want, but like right after that too is another like high action scene where you go into the lake and stronghold, which I ended up, at first I was like, oh my gosh, they're still coming at me. Like so many, am I not supposed to fight all these? Maybe I need to run, but eventually I just bared down and like attacked every lake I could. And it took a long time, but I ended up enjoying that sequence quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I thought that sequence was fantastic.
Yeah. I wish they'd communicated a little bit better that they will just keep respawning until you run past them. So it is supposed to be this like, oh, I'm being overwhelmed by lichens. I need to run, like I need to do, you know, like get on the pulley or whatever and run past them. Because I definitely did what you did, is like just stick in the corner with the sniper rifle and just ran out of ammo. Of like I've done everything I can. I don't know what else I can do to like fight these guys. And then I realized like, okay, you can just keep going.
I killed them all. They'll eventually stop. Yeah.
Okay.
I was committed. I was not leaving that room till every one of them sons of bitches were out of commission.
I hated that it like sounded like you could make a choice though. Like with some of the dialogue, it sounded, because I actually like paused and I asked a friend that reviewed it. I was like, was there a choice to join forces with him? It's like the way some of the dialogue was like, you could have sided with me. And I don't know. I was like, I'm used to choice-based games where I was just like, wait, was there an option to join him? Or like, did I mess up somehow? Like
with Heisenberg?
Yeah, because he like gives you this really compelling argument of why you should join forces with him against Mother Miranda. And I kind of wanted to, because I don't know, horn dog, I guess. I was just like, yeah, let's do it. It's a date.
Yeah, I'm not a horn dog, and I also wanted him to, because it kind of made sense. I was like, well, hold on, why are we not like? I don't know why Heisenberg is bad, or why it would be bad to team up with him yet. Like, it seems like he's at least willing to help you out. So why don't we do this?
He wanted to use your infant daughter as a super weapon.
But
I don't understand why that's bad.
But I feel like you should have asked more questions. I feel like there should have been a little bit. Okay, what does that look like before I agreed to this? Like, I need a little bit of follow up. But instead, he's just like, no, you don't get to use my daughter. Like, you're evil now, Magneto. So like, I feel like there was a little bit of just like, does my daughter get to survive this? If so, I think it might be worth it.
It would have been at least a kind of cool narrative thing where, okay, for a while I'm teaming up with this monster to fight another monster, and then obviously he'll betray me. But like, it would have been, I think, a cool opportunity for them to like explore.
I would have loved to see two branching endings and having one be you taking it on, because I feel like that could have set up a really cool either like, wow, like, okay, there's like a potential redemptive thing, and like maybe he can return to some kind of normalcy, because it's obvious he resents the position he's in. Or it could be another really epic like betrayal arc of like, oh, I'm an idiot, why did I trust this dude? You're still cute, but like I have to kill you now. Like Lady D, like darn. I don't know. I thought it had a lot of potential, but I was really confused by that. But I think his and the Dollhouse were my favorite because, I don't know, it made you feel immersed. It made you care about the characters beyond just being mindless enemies. And I think that's what everybody wanted with Lady D. And that's why everybody fixated on her. Like, okay, like there's some nuance here. It's not just this mindless monster. Like, she's high class. Like, she got a booty, she got daughters, she's got family, she's got ties, and that's what he was. Is like you saw that conflict of like, he knows the situation he's in, but it doesn't mean he's a mindless follower like the other people were that we had to confront. And I thought that was a nice juxtaposition of branching into those lore and that humanity that we were talking about earlier. He was a compelling character. Well, he was probably my favorite part of this.
That's why I wish they had teamed up with him for a little bit, because I don't think they really fully explored
Right.
very well. Like, I don't know a whole lot about what that guy wanted exactly, or who he was, or what he was doing. So
DLC.
He wanted to make propeller men. And have fun with magnets.
I really like the design of that propeller man. Actually,
I think I think it's the most knowing area though, because it's like it's always it's a nod to like how these games always do, like, okay, here's the facility, here's the lab, here's like the factory area, and I like as you're reading the notes, especially specifically with the propeller guy, he's like, I tried a lot of stuff. This one didn't work out. He cut his own arms off with the propeller, and I just let him loose. I don't know. Well, moving on, and then you fight that thing. I think it's like so knowingly stupid that I actually enjoyed that factory section, even though there are some like really frustrating encounters there.
Yeah, what did you guys think about the factory? I know, Dan, it sounds like you didn't like it. I'm like, I don't think I hated it, but it was a part of the game that I was kind of like started to get worn down by. I was kind of like, another one of these.
Exactly. I think for me it was that I felt like the other sections that came, like the dollhouse was really interesting, even the mansion, and then the water level too. And then I'm like, all right, this is going to be a factory. I'm going to have to like turn on the power. I know what I'm going to have to do throughout this, and just fight a bunch of guys. I thought the enemies were cool that were in there, but I wanted something a little different, and I know it's another like throwback to, you always have the industrial area, right? Like RE4, but for me, it felt the least imaginative to me, and I wanted something that I felt like matched up better with the previous areas. So that was my only like what bothered me about it. And it's an annoying area to get through, especially when you're trying to get to the end and you're just like, I am so ready for this to get to see what's coming, you know. And if they maybe put like Heisenberg in the story more of that, I feel like it could have been more interesting. But we only see those little slices of him throughout it where he's taunting us a bit. So that was my beef with it.
We need a Heisenberg game.
What did you guys think of that Heisenberg fight, though? Once you get to the end of the factory and actually fight him,
that was so
good.
Good. What?
So ridiculous.
Let's get into it. That shit was awesome.
It was stressful.
This junk heap Gundam fight at the end of this game was so badass.
What is going on here? What is this?
It would be a cool fight in a different game.
All right. Here's my thing with this. I think the game built up to its action really well, because at some point it's going to stop being a horror game, but it didn't ever feel like it had to be one or the other. Like, it kind of transitioned to them very naturally for me. So by the time I get to the factory and it's leaning more towards action before it goes completely off the rails with the Gundam fight and the Chris section, like I felt like it had worked its way up there, that I was ready to just move on and take that part of the game. That I had no beef with it. I do think the factory dragged quite a bit, but like I was thinking about replaying the game, and my first hang up was that was a really long section. I don't know.
Yeah,
it
dragged on way too long.
But like, I don't think I disliked it, and I think like it was a great segue to get it to where you're going to be Chris, and it's going to be Call of Duty. Like, because, you know, it's starting to waffle really heavily between them. I liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought the enemies were really cool. I thought there was a cool Regenerator homage in there, even though not even nearly as scary as the Regenerator. Those dudes with the hearts you have to shoot out.
The zombies with VR masks, they did it for you.
It looked like cyberpunk a little bit.
It's like, it was a question. It was a question.
Yeah, they were fun. You had to shoot them off before you could get a headshot. A whole new dynamic to fighting them.
They were doing such a good job making a horror game. So that's why I didn't like it when they went in the other direction. Okay, so whatever it became at the end of that factory, when they just went into pure insanity, right? Like, let's just have Magnet Man and then the Chris segment, even worse, right? But we'll get to that in a second. But there was no reason to do any of that stuff. They were doing a really good job making a really cool horror game. It's their game. They can do what they want. But I didn't like it when they went off course to this other thing.
Dan,
I think that's fair. I just am confused by the surprise that the game went to where it did, because for 25 years, almost all mainline Resident Evils end with an RPG to the face. Like, quite literally. Like, that I don't understand.
Can I not hope for a better world? Like, can we?
You
can we all
can,
hope for that
but
world to exist out there?
You can, and I understand where you're coming from, but I'm just like, don't understand why you would be surprised
I'm
with
maybe, like,
there, you know?
I don't want to go through the game and be like, well, I know this is just the way it has to be.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
dare to have
Like
that
having a
horror game.
teenager. You're not surprised, you're just disappointed.
I guess I came from it from a different place. I hope I'm not being like too competitive.
No, I love this though, because I feel like you two have such opposing views that you're going to be very reflective of a lot of the players, because Dan's making really good points, but so are you. I think you both are nuts, but like, I think this is what this is what Spoiler Cast should be. You should have two people that have very opposing opinions, because you're reflecting the spectrum of the player base. And that's important because people, especially Resident Evil 4, some people swear it's the worst. Some people swear it's the absolute best.
Say it's the worst?
Oh, I met my first one not too long ago, and let me tell you, I was shocked, I say. But I feel like this discussion gives you that like backstory and how people perceived these adventures, and I really do feel like how you felt about Resident Evil 4 will very much color how you feel about Resident Evil Village, like 100%.
I will say though that I definitely think this game has a stronger back third than Resident Evil 7 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
When the second you leave the Baker house, I think that game like gets way worse. Like the boat and the mines, I think are both pretty bad. Whereas I think I don't think it's the best part of the game, but I think this holds up better than those sections.
I'm not going to argue that. I think I thought 7 was a miserable experience, pretty much. So I agree. Every part of this game, even the parts I didn't like, except for the Chris segment, was better than 7.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Chris here in a minute. Suriel, what did you think, before we do that, what did you think of that mech fight against Heisenberg?
I thought it was a very different type. It was like the quintessential like hit the weak points fight. But I do like that they just play around with that stuff. Piece of like he's going to kick you off of the machine at some point. And you have to shoot him in the face, and then you're going to end with like you being magnetized into the air. I thought it was just like this really ridiculous thing of just like here's us going like flipping this action slider to the max, and this is not like this is the exact opposite of Resident Evil, but it still feels like it is almost in conversation more with like 6 than anything else, of just like this is when like this world-ending catastrophe is happening and you're just fighting giant monsters all the time. So I totally get Dan's kind of disappointment that it didn't feel like Resident Evil, but like there are games in the series that alludes to even in the spectrum.
I'm not even trying to say it doesn't feel like Resident Evil. They've definitely done all kinds of weird and zany and wacky stuff all the time. I thought they were making a really cool horror game. And then we just go, it's not anymore. That whole 33%, that last 33% of the game is just like a completely different game, really.
I didn't have an issue with it, but I mean, this is something we said at the beginning of this cast, is like, it felt like a very disjointed, it felt like spliced games together, and sometimes that splicing worked, sometimes it didn't. I personally didn't like the factory level just because, kind of to Kim's point, it just felt done before a lot. I expected it, so I didn't have like the violent like opposition to it or anything, but like I had that moment when I saw us go into it, I was like, crap. I was like, I never liked this part in these games. And it's kind of like that part I feel like in any game there's always those parts of, especially when you talk about replaying it and be like, oh, I'm so excited to replay it, but I'm not excited for this part. And the factory and the industrial parts are always that for me, no matter what.
You can get through them pretty quickly the second time once you know, because it is a lot of like you need to go to point A and then come back, and then, like like once you figure out how that level works, I think you can get through it pretty quickly. But that first time, it's definitely, because it's so dark, because there are so many places where you have to go back to this first room and then open this other door instead. I feel like it is very easy to get lost.
I especially liked it in that segment when Mr. Winters told me that it was dark. I was not able to tell it. So he was like, "It's dark." I'm like, "Whoa."
Oh, see,
he's like,
he's a smart
that did stand out to me.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about, Dan. I think you're right. He's pretty interesting. Just so people are keeping track with us, after this boss battle with Heisenberg, you kill Heisenberg, but at the same time, Ethan gets his heart ripped out and quote unquote dies. And then we, as we've talked about, transition to this section with Chris, which is more action focused, where Chris is like, I did like his guns, like would take out enemies in like 1 or 2 hits. And I think that section would have worked really well if the stuff we'd had before was a little bit slower paced. But the fact that you've had like several action scenes with Ethan that are sort of ramped up in intensity, the fact that we get to Chris and it's just another action scene ramped up in intensity, it's just more of the same. Whereas if we had sort of a slower, dollhouse like section right before Chris, I think that would have like been a nice palate cleanser.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. It was jarring.
Did I not like the Chris segment for a lot of reasons I'm sure we're going to get into, but it also felt really weird to have that segment right before you went back to having your old kit to fight the boss of the game. It's like, that is really weird, right? Like
that I agree with. I thought the final boss of this game was bad.
I out of place, right? Like where did this all come from? It's just like, hey, here's a final boss. Well, I guess we have to have a final boss fight. Let's throw it in. Here you go. Yeah. And she makes it dark. Cool, right? She makes it dark. And then that's it. That's the fight.
I really wanting to have it both ways, because I feel like I really like that opening Chris section, but I liked it because I thought, is this going to be the rest of this game? Is it like Ethan Winters is dead, Chris has to do cleanup on the rest of the game? I think if they had dedicated themselves to that, because Ethan dies anyway, so it's not like they were planning to bring him back or whatever, like as like the continuing protagonist. I think I would have liked the game more if it was like Chris kills Miranda and does the entire thing, and gets to develop the new Rose or whatever, and then that's the end of the game, is that he kills Miranda, because I think that would have been a pretty good way to tie up the Ethan loose ends. But the fact that they go back, I think, is maybe why I didn't like that section, because it just feels like oh, surprise, but not really.
Regressive,
is why I found that section like at the time really cool, but overall I think it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah,
Really
it also.
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just like they like ramp. When you play as Chris, the game is basically like you are God. Like you have more ammo than you'll ever be able to use. You are so overpowered. And then when you go back to Ethan, like my inventory at that time was screwed when I left Ethan. Like I had used up everything. That boss fight was just annoying because I didn't have enough to get through it. I just bumped the difficulty down to easy. I was like, I'm not banging my head against this. Like it was such a whiplash that left me sour on that very end. That said, thought that Chris section was rad. I thought when you point the little light at it, like that scene in Modern Warfare, the new Modern Warfare, and the bombs come.
See,
are you with me? You actually liked that? That was like that could have been the worst part of the entire game. Just, hey, all right, big dude, beep, yeah, we're gonna get you. Like Hawk, call it in. It's like, Dan, what is this?
You're gonna hate me. You're gonna hate me, and I feel like Dan is gonna write me off. Like, okay, we're not friends anymore. I really liked that sequence too. But for context, I'm with Blake. Like, we're constantly the people that's playing Warzone. We're constantly the people that are playing shooters. I like shooters. I felt like it was really jarring, the transition to Chris, because he was so overpowered. Like, I remember, because my partner never played Resident Evil, and I remember he came in and he was like, wait, what game are you playing? And I had to explain to him that it was still Resident Evil, but like, trust me, source, dude, trust me. And like, and that just the guns were so radically different than the guns and the weaponry we've had this entire time, which makes sense. High grade military gear, of course, it's going to be different, but it felt almost too easy. But I did like the fact that, because I was one of those people that was very concerned. Like, I'm too emotionally invested in games, and I was really freaked out by the possibility that, like, wow, did Chris really turn? Like, is he really the bad guy? And even though that would have made sense with a lot of the fan theories, I was really worried that was going to be true. So I really liked kind of seeing the kinder side of him. And when he's like talking,
you think he was kinder then?
I
do.
Because Kim,
I do. Well, hey, wait, I'm explaining why. Hold on. I'm explaining why. Because there's that sequence when he's talking to Ethan right before he tells him lay low, but then gives him this giant chainsaw type vehicle, because that's how you lay low. But like, it not kinder in the words of he's like, let me give you a puppy and rainbows. But you saw him smile. You saw him in a less copy paste light. You saw him more as a developed character versus, which I've missed. I've missed that. And Chris is one of my favorite characters in the franchise, which I know that's another thing that people are like, oh my God, really? Do you need to play Resident Evil? But like, I do really like him. And I liked those softer moments in those in between him and Ethan. And I loved, as bitter as this is going to sound, and as like almost cruel as this is going to sound, I loved seeing that moment when he kind of shoulders that failure to save Ethan, because you kind of see it. you see his shoulders drop and you're just like, and then he thinks he can save him. And then he has to kind of shoulder that failure a second time when he takes Rose and
you
Nia.
see his guilt with it. I just thought sometimes he was kind of a dick about it. Like even when he
military are always dicks. Well, I'm a dick.
All right, let's not get personal here.
What did the rest of you guys think of Chris? I'm curious. Go ahead, Kim.
No, like Chris, actually, I like Chris a lot more than a lot of people I think do. Actually, I always say like I like him more than Leon personally, but in this game, yeah, I know. In this game in particular, I just didn't really care for his character because I think, as we talked about earlier, his actions just never made sense to me within the whole thing. I'm like, you could have avoided a lot of this crap if you would have just like had a conversation. I did like seeing some, as you talked about, Liana, some of his like guilt towards the end, and you can tell he felt bad, but like his whole interaction with Nia in the end, like when he finds her, it's just a weird like correspondence to like somebody who you just like, and I didn't know if it because he was still maybe on the fence of like, can I trust her or not? Because even I was like, oh, is she gonna come at you or something at this point, just like when they're talking. But I felt like he took the very like, this is what I gotta do, and I feel bad that people are gonna die. They're gonna die though along the way, and it just had a hard time like feeling like good about Chris in his role in the game and what he did. Like I get it a little bit, but like I said, that whole disconnect at what happened in the beginning, and then him not, having he had the chances to talk to Ethan and be real with him and try to make a better solution, and I just felt like he didn't do it.
He's like the Tinder guy, just bad at communication.
There are some interesting story revelation stuff in this Chris section too. I like the part where, the Spencer Mansion stuff, like specifically where you find out that Spencer had actually come and hung out with, as I understand it, Mother Miranda, and that's where he got some of the ideas. He was like, I'm going to experiment on, I think, the mold, and then that's how he created the T virus, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the implication. They left it kind of nebulous though, so they can take it wherever they want. But yeah, that was essentially the birthplace of those ideas at the very least for Spencer.
So I thought that was cool to see.
I liked it.
Back to the original game.
I thought it was a little bit like weird the way he was like, "Oh yeah, I like your logo. I'm gonna steal that. You guys don't have copyright here. Right? Take that to my corporation. It'll be cool."
This is a blue umbrella.
Confirmed.
Color swap, problem solved. Cool. Well, I mean, that kind of brings us to the very end of the game. We've talked about the last boss fight. I mean, it was kind of just a normal boss fight.
I mean, it felt weirdly. As far as boss fights go, I didn't really totally mind it as a boss fight. I mean, the darkness kind of thing is always a cool mechanic to throw into a boss fight, but like, there's almost no contact. It's just like, here I am, I'm the boss, let's roll. That's like the only time in the game you ever even like interact with that character, pretty much. And it's very unfulfilling.
After a game full of extremely strong boss fights, it was like not with a bang, but with a whimper. Credits roll.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well.
I think a lot of it was because they don't really. I think they maybe felt comfortable with like, oh, we've kind of been setting her up the entire time. But I think I would have liked to see a little bit more of like, this is her area, and like you kind of have to do maybe one final sprint where she's kind of talking to you and characterize her a little bit more before it's like, yeah, you know who I am. Like, let's just do this, right?
I'm so bummed
it's the old lady who's been helping me the whole time.
Should have been the Lady D boss fight at the end. Just made Mother Miranda a dragon.
I love the fact that like I loved her character design. Her character design was my favorite of the entire game. I wish they would have done more with the hallucinations. I wish the final boss fight would have had like you just said with Lady D, like if she like threw him in different instances where he thinks he's back in the castle. Oh, now he thinks he's back on the boat. Oh, now he thinks he's back in the dollhouse. Where am I? Like, and then it's this constant, like, I think the whiplash potential there could have been really cool to really confuse the player of like, where the hell am I? Am I at the end? Am I not? Like, did I actually take down these? Did I win? Did I whatever? And yeah, it felt very rushed. It kind of, I think Dan, you were the one that said it earlier. I feel like it had so much potential, but it felt like they like completed the game and they're like, oh crap, we forgot the final boss.
Right, exactly. Like, let's add something now.
Liana, that idea is so rad. Could you imagine, like, you go back to the Jack Baker, like, garage boss fight? Oh, that would have been so cool.
There was
That would
so
have been
much
kind of cool, actually.
potential.
Yeah.
Well, Ethan, as we've talked about, does die in the end. He basically sacrifices himself so that Chris and Mia and Rose can escape, which is, I guess, heroic. I didn't think much of the character.
He already
and
died. That's what it was in my mind. I'm like, I don't know if I feel bad about it.
The credits rolled, and I was like, okay, that is another Resident Evil story, whatever. But then there was the post-credit scene, and I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yes,
I like this. What did you guys think of that post-credit scene?
Yeah, I'm when I saw that the father story was done, I thought the game wasn't over. I thought that it was like, oh, is there a section where you play as young Rose? I thought that would have been pretty cool, but like, yeah, seeing that ending cutscene where it's like, I guess she's the new protagonist of the series. Like, that's sort of where I'm leaning. But I imagine, after this, we'll probably get like the Resident Evil 4 remake, which I'm very curious to see. But like, the idea of like Resident Evil 9 starring a whole new character in this time leap with like, 15 years or however many years later, and like she's, oh yeah, I'm already the superpower. I'm the boss, effectively. I'm very curious to see where they go with that story, because I think it's a really promising direction for that series for sure.
Yeah, and in case people are listening to this and haven't played the game, which you shouldn't, go play the game. But the post-credit scene basically shows us Chris's daughter, Rose. Sorry, not Chris's daughter. Ethan's and Mia's daughter, Rose, as an adult, well, young woman, somewhere in her teens.
Young adult.
The impression I got. At Ethan's grave, sort of mourning over the father, and then she, walks back to the car, and we find out that she's being guarded by BSAA agents, and she apparently has some kind of powers, and so it kind of sets her up as like, I guess she could be the protagonist of the next game.
It's clearly doing that.
Whatever they want. Like they set themselves up where they have the freedom to retcon if they want. They have the freedom to do something completely new if they want. Like, it was the safe ending to make, but I'm not mad at it because, like, I don't know, Chris, it's implied that Chris is now like her step-in dad because he's the older Chris and he's like waiting for her, and I don't know, I feel like I'm ready for something new, and I know not a lot of Resident Evil fans are. I know that was a big concern people had with going into Village was, wow, this is a lot of supernatural creatures. Are they going too new too fast? But my biggest problem, and it's kind of why I couldn't really connect to Resident Evil 7, despite so many people liking it, was just like, I'm ready for something different. Like, and that's, I hate even saying that because like at that point it's like, well, then why do you even like Resident Evil? And I get it, but I wanted some of the canon stuff that is so convoluted now. It's gotten to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore, and I don't know, if you got to retcon some of that shit, retcon it, because you've already convoluted it to the point of beyond recognition for some of it. So it's like, you're already in that direction. Instead of backtracking that direction, own it and do something really shocking for the next one. Like, I don't know, heck, aliens, bring them in. Let's do it. Let's do whatever you want. Like, you set yourself up to have.
I want it to be spooky, scary still in.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
But
with aliens.
Where's the carrier crashes through the front door?
We can do both. It's very easy to do both.
I think they're gonna do.
Okay, go ahead.
I think they're gonna do like a Darkness style game, first person shooter, but your mold comes out at you like little hands. You got powers.
Yeah, I'd be very curious what the horror game looks like when you have powers, but I'm sure they could do it.
So,
I actually do think that Ethan is still alive. I think I do think that, even though that doesn't
Zach
sound.
is the final boss. And she's gonna have to fight her father. And there's gonna be all this tension between her and Chris, because she's gonna be like, Chris, you're the reason why my father died, and you're not my father. You can't tell me what to do. It's all coming up in
Chris and Ethan run off into the sunset together. He's like, screw you, Mia. I found my real.
I was like on a roll there, but that's what I think.
He survived having his heart ripped out. He's an invincible mold god creature that we don't understand the powers of. He survived whatever the hell.
What about Mia?
Bomb? No problem.
I would like it if he's the villain in the next game.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, it's set up that way, right? I mean, it can very well happen.
I mean, anything can happen.
The weird thing about this is she's going to his grave and mourning, and get the impression that she comes every week, and it's like, Really?
Wasn't it his birthday?
This guy died when you were a baby. Like, you don't know anything about him. Like, why do you care? Like, that's one of the
Does he
things
get
that
the sacrifice?
Yeah. I think Liana's correct, right?
It was his birthday, so she goes once a year to just.
Sure.
I would
Okay, once a
assume
year.
that Chris is like, and this is just purely conjecture on my part because we obviously don't know, but I get the sense because like you end the game with Chris obviously feeling very guilty and feeling responsible for Mia. So I would assume that, and you know, he made sure that Rose had Ethan's jacket. The last thing Ethan did was put his jacket on top of his daughter, and the fact that she's wearing it is very clear. Like Chris probably went above and beyond to keep her father's memory alive. So I think, to me, I think he probably was very honest with Rose about the events and what happened, and that was kind of her way of honoring. But then you see the other like military-esque dude who's like Secret Service type and trying to like control her, and she's got this animosity. Like she's angry. She's angry at him. And yeah, I think Kim's. I say I would laugh, but like I think I'm not going to be surprised if Kim hits the nail on the head. That like. She has this rift between what she knows, what she thinks she knows, thinking that maybe she doesn't know the whole picture. I'm torn between Chris being a father figure versus what actually went down. Like, could he have done something differently? And to see like a confrontation on a monumental scale of her like confronting Ethan, and I think Mia's gone. I think we can go ahead and just count that hoe like out. I think she either died or went insane or something, because they treated Mia like an afterthought this entire time, and the time jump definitely supports that.
I think the game would have been more interesting with her as the protagonist, to be honest with you, than Ethan. Somebody said that on my Twitter, I believe, Natalie at Fanbyte, and I was like, I actually agree with you on that. Like, I would have rather played this game as Mia trying to save her daughter than Ethan. But
would have been kind of cool, actually. Yeah, I would love in the next game if he plays like Old Man Chris, actually. Like Old Man Chris and like teaming up with Rose. Like,
going through his regrets in life.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts on the game? We should probably wrap up here soon.
Yeah. I've really come down hard on this last parts of the game, so I want to be clear. I really did like this game overall. Just that the last third, I guess, just to me really brought the whole experience down. But overall, I thought it was a really solid game, and it definitely my favorite modern Resident Evil game.
Awesome. Blake, any final thoughts?
Yeah, did y'all notice person walking in that final cutscene? Lingers on him. He's way off in the background.
Yeah.
It's just someone walking. Wonder who that is.
It's Ethan, obviously.
Yeah, probably not.
It's
definitely a guy.
Can someone help me out here? I was thinking about this the other day. What has Leon been up to the past 2 games?
He's the guy walking.
Yeah, he's making new Mr. X's with Wesker, and that's going to be the plot for the next game. All right, boom.
How does Resident Evil 6 end? Where does it leave Leon?
Oh God, that game ends like 9 times, so I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, he's just hanging out, enjoying the fact that he saved the world.
Okay.
He's like trying to buy more designer jackets and
That's right.
trying to keep his hair from going
Trying
gray.
to be pretty. Yeah.
I think it's time to bring him back.
It might be. That'd be great. Liana, any final thoughts?
Really liked it. I like the potential for the future. I like the fact that they're giving themselves the freedom. I love it when studios do it. Does it always end well? No, but I appreciate the risk. And I'm with Blake that the fact that Resident Evil 4 is my favorite game in the franchise, bar none. I have probably played that game close to 30 times. I will never get rid of my PS2 because of that game. Well, that and a couple of others, but like, and this felt like a love letter to Resident Evil 4 in some of the best ways. And I was very excited to see that. There was a couple of missteps, but from my personal playthrough, I wasn't reviewing it, so I feel like I was allowed to be a little less critical. Not that I wasn't critical at all, but I feel like I was allowed to just have more fun with it and kind of lean into that Resident Evil 4 love a little bit more. And I was really, there was a couple of missteps, but nothing that like destroyed the integrity of the game for me. I feel like if I did review it, I would have echoed a lot of what Ben said in his review of giving it a 9.25. I wish they would have done a little bit more, but they didn't do anything I didn't expect, because I feel like Capcom has kind of done this before, where like they should have done this instead, or why did you rush this part and like stay focused on this other part? And so I kind of feel like I'm a little dead into that. But yeah, if you like Resident Evil 4 at all, I think you'll really enjoy it, because this definitely felt like a love letter between that, Resident Evil 2, and obviously Resident Evil 7.
Kim, what about you?
Yeah, I really enjoy. I'm more with Dan on this. I was actually, when I finished the game, my fiance was like, "Hey, how'd you like it?" And I was like, you know what? I feel like I really liked the game for the majority of it, first half, like, I don't know, like up until the like 6 hours, and then the last 3 for me kind of fell flat, but I liked where everything was set up for where it's going. So that has me really curious what they're going to do in the future with everything. And I think, you know, as Liana said, if you like Resident Evil 4, like there's so many good callbacks to it in this that were really fun to find and play. And I remember when I first started, like those first few hours of the game, especially, I'm like, this is fun. Like, I'm glad I'm back in a Resident Evil game. I'm glad I'm doing this. I'm playing this. Like, it was just, it felt good. And like I said, I don't know if maybe because towards the end I was just like ready for, with the factory, with everything going on and how they built it up, is like, all right, I'm ready for this to be done. But at the same time, like, I really liked what I played. And I think this game does a lot of interesting things and a lot of things well, and sets up maybe for a new, you know, place for the series to go that, you know, what they end up doing is anyone's guess at this point. So I'm curious for the future.
Great. Suriel, what about you? Any final thoughts?
I'm pretty excited about where this leaves the franchise, both narratively and like design wise. I think that after 7, I think it was very easy to see that series trying to move away from like anything that wasn't like pure horror, which I think Resident Evil 7 definitely was, but I think I wasn't always like a fan of what it did in that realm. So I feel like this, I'm glad that they took kind of the risk of like saying, well, let's introduce more action stuff, more stuff that isn't just like spooky, scary house. And so I'm really happy that they feel like able to experiment more with the franchise than maybe Resident Evil 7 kind of led on. So I'm pretty excited about where this is going. And I think this is definitely for me, like the best flavor of Resident Evil, of like, here's a lot of really creepy stuff, and here's like some really intense stuff and some action stuff as well. So I'm happy with it. And I'm hopeful for what they end up doing next.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode, Suriel. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. If people want to read your review or follow you, how should they do that?
Yeah, you can read my review on polygon.com. You just go to the reviews tab and it'll be on there. And if you want to follow any Twitch or podcast appearances I'm on, you can follow me at Suriel Vazquez on Twitter, or you can go to patreon.com/minmax with 2 N's, or Minmax Show, I think, is our handle on social. And we have a bunch of, you know, videos and streams and stuff there as well. So
great. Well, thanks again. And thank you everyone out there for watching or listening to this episode of Spoiled. If you liked it, please let us know and maybe we'll do some more. If you hated it, well, I don't know, maybe we could use some constructive criticism. Otherwise,
be nice.
Constructive
to everybody out there. Enjoy some games. Hope you enjoyed Resident Evil. We sure did. So thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.
What was that?